So when I was in seminary, they told us something that I've paid attention to, and that is to pay attention when scriptures are coupled, put together one right after another, particularly if they have connector passages. And I think this two pieces of scripture, two stories, are coupled together and have a lot to do about our faith. Luke in particular really stresses this. So we have the Samaritan, sometimes called the Good Samaritan, although if you translate it, the word good never shows up. That's what we call it. And then the story of the two sisters, Mary and Martha. Both are familiar stories. We tell them a lot because we like to tell stories. So you know, Mary and Martha have Jesus over, and Martha wants everything to be perfect. Now you might think, why is she so much of a perfectionist? Well, and she probably is a perfectionist, but there's actually a reason. The traditions of that century in the Palestinian village life would have been that you offered the absolute best hospitality you could to whoever visited your home. And for Martha, Jesus coming to their home means that he is an elevated guest. So she wants it to be perfect. You know, we've met Mary and Martha before. Remember, we met them in the story about their brother, Lazarus. And when he dies and is brought back to life by Jesus. And once again, if we think about the roles the sisters play, they're very similar. So we have Martha, that go-to hostess, probably the one you would want to plan your party, really focusing on this dinner. And you have Mary, the unconventional, contemplative sister. So when Jesus arrives at their home, what happens? Martha goes into super hyper hospitality mode, and Mary becomes very contemplative and sits at Jesus' feet. Eugene Peterson, in his translation of the Message, translates Jesus' response this way. Martha, dear Martha, you're fussing far too much and getting yourself worked up over nothing. There is only one thing is essential, and Mary has chosen it. It's the main course, and it won't be taken away from her. Now, I don't want you to think that Jesus is actually condemning Martha. He isn't, and he understands that the practices would have been to extend hospitality. But he wants to legitimize Mary's actions, those of sitting at his feet, of being a student of Scripture. And I think that's a great reminder as we begin our Lenten season together, that one of the things that Jesus asks us to do is to focus or become scholars of Scripture. Now, if you think about it, I will tell you, I often liken this to the vertical part of our cross, the up and down. Our relationship with God. Then we get to the Samaritan story. You do need to know, and you probably remember, that Samaritans are half-breeds. They're half Jew and half other. It happened when, of course, the northern kingdoms were taken captives by the Assyrians. And as often happens, there was intermarriage during that time. And they came up with this half practicing Jew, half practicing worship of idols and gods. And so for the Jews, that was absolutely despicable. They didn't like that. And then to add on top of that, when the Jews do return to Jerusalem and they are trying to rebuild the temple, some Samaritans would pour pig's blood on the temple site. And if you go back to the Old Testament, you know that that basically defiles the temple space. And so they have to do the ritual clean before they can continue to build. So do understand, this is why the Jews have such a strong feeling about the Samaritans. Probably stronger than the Romans, who are currently occupying as they have been conquered by them. So we get this story that Jesus tells about the Samaritan. Oftentimes, Jews, if they were going from Jerusalem to Jericho, would actually go around Samaria so they wouldn't have to go through. But for some reason, in our story, the man who's traveling from Jerusalem to Jericho, probably a Jew, decides to go through Samaria. Maybe it was during the day and he thought he was going to be safe. We don't know why he's doing it, but we know he did it. And of course, you know the story. Thieves, thugs befell him, and he is beaten to an inch of his death and left by the side of the road. And lo, here comes a priest. He represents the religious people. And he points out something that, I've heard before, and that is that oftentimes we talk the talk, but rarely we walk the walk. And this guy is that perfect example. So he goes along the other side of the road. Now, it may be that he was going to perform some ritual or rite, and if he were to touch this person that had blood on them, once again, he'd become unclean, and he'd have to go ritually clean himself before he could do his priestly duties. But we don't know for sure. And then the second person, the Levite, the scholar, the legal scholar comes by. He's probably a Jew too, by the way. Quite possibly this guy's next door neighbor. We don't know, but certainly a neighbor. And he also walks along on the other side of the road, not willing to risk his own personal self. And then the third guy comes, the Samaritan, the half-breed, probably doesn't even worship the right God. And he gets off his donkey, and he cleans the wounds, places the man on his donkey, takes him to a neighboring inn, cares for him for that evening, and then assures that there is at least a safe place for this man to stay until he is better. I think during this Lenten season, the other thing that I invite us to focus on, and that is our relationship with our neighbor. So if we look at the cross, look at our horizontal piece, I think that's our relationship with our neighbors. I think Lenten is a perfect time for us to reconnect with God. Because, let's be honest, life is busy. We got lots of things going on, and sometimes we get really busy and we forget to connect. Lent gives us 40 days to really concentrate on reconnecting. So, on the back of your bulletin, the back page, there's a section called Notes. I want everybody to find that, and a writing instrument. And I want you to make a cross on the back of that. And think of one thing you can do and connect with God, that horizontal piece. One thing that you could do for 38 days that would connect you with God. It could be that you just are going to take our Lenten devotional and read the paragraph for the day. Or you might want to be more extensive and do some more scripture reading. It might be that you just want to read a psalm a day. What is it that you want to do? You could just find a time in Dennis and say, I'm going to pray from 8 to 8:05 every morning. Choose one thing that you would like to do and write it down. Put it on that part of the cross that's your relationship with God. What are you going to do? And then on the horizontal bar, and I'll tell you, for me, this is the harder part. How am I going to love my neighbor? We have lots of opportunities here at First Presbyterian Church. So whether it be working in the food pantry or working with the SOS dinners, whether it be joining the sacred conversations that are happening this month, how are you going to connect with your neighbor? And write that down. Why am I having you write it down? It's an old educational principle. We know that if you actually write it down, you put it in your brain in a different place, you tend to remember. That's why when you make lists, you tend to remember. That's why I want you to write it down. And if you're like me, go home and put it on your refrigerator or your bathroom mirror or wherever it is that you make notes to yourself so you don't forget. And spend 38 days. That's how many we have left. Oh, 36 days. Oh, and the other thing, in the very center of our cross, I'm going to tell you that is the heart of Jesus, where worship and service meet. That's Jesus. So spend some time these next 36 days meeting Jesus in the very heart of Jesus. You see, that's what the gospel is all about. Amen. I'm going to invite you to stand as you are able for our affirmation of faith.